Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanako Oberhuber, and I'm your host. My guest today is Jeffrey Cosker. Hi.
Hello, Wanako. Thanks for having me.
So happy you took the time, and we've been planning this since a long time. So I'm really happy to have you here.
It's good to be here.
So we might just as well start with the big question that I like to ask is where are you today and how from the point of view of mind?
So, you said, where am I today from the point of view of my mind? Was that correct, Wanako?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, and it's been, we've been communicating for a while, and finally the Spirit has brought us together. So it feels like the right timing. Yeah, I find myself in Nevada right now. And, you know, today is an interesting day for me. I woke up. I wake up quite early, and you know this path of the Course in Miracles and following guidance, is so clear. And I forget at times. I get caught up with I may think I should do something or have to mow the lawn or take care of some earthly responsibilities. But today I had quite an interesting morning where I kind of let everything drop away, and I knew we had this at 11:30. But aside from that, I just really tried to tune in, and I started writing some correspondence with some of the inmates that I communicate with, and it was the first time I've had an overwhelming activation, I call it, where my whole body is kind of vibrating, which I call vibrating with purpose, when I am in touch or in alignment with, what the Spirit wants for me in the moment. And today, it's been a while since I felt that kind of significant activation, where it was sustained for a long period of time this morning as I continued in my function. And it's just a flag along the way for me of the Spirit saying, yeah, I'm still here. I've had some profound experiences that led me to this path and led me to being in Nevada. And, I had spent some time in spiritual community. But, it always comes back to the same basic thing, that am I listening in the moment? Am I identifying with that voice of the ego and false responsibility and all those other things? Or am I actually listening to what he would have me do in the moment? And fortunately today, that's where I'm at. I had quite an experience of just really sinking in and then listening and following. And, most days I do. I'm fortunate to be in a place in my life where I do this full time. I don't have a job as the world would have it. I did until I was about 39 years old. That was 8 years ago. But I don't have those type of responsibilities anymore. Turning my life over to first the 12 steps and then to A Course in Miracles, and following that internal guide has absolutely meant everything to me. So my state of mind is great today. I feel very connected, and that's, the integration piece is what I work towards, and some days are better than others. I'm not in a consistent high, state like that, like some people that I've had the fortunate, I was fortunate to be around. But the practice becomes continuing to hear that voice to elevate my mind to a place where I can hear the clarity and then, feel like I'm being done through, rather than, trying to do things the way I've done them in the past. So.
Now, the second part of the question was, how did you get here?
Okay. Excuse me. Yeah. So as I shared, my path started about 8 years ago, and I had never heard of A Course in Miracles. I had never really practiced anything to do with spirituality. I was pretty caught up in the world with materialism, and I had the same job. I worked in a family business for 20 some odd years. And so I was 39 when my shift happened. And it was drugs and alcohol that led me to what they call in the books, an incomprehensible demoralization, where I got to my knees and I was able to surrender. And, I didn't know anything of that I was allegiant to a voice in my head that was trying to kill me. And it was so clear to everyone around me. But it was during that time, I was living on the East Coast, and I had a deep surrender. I went and I asked those three words, which I fought for so long not to say, and it was, "I need help." And my father was the first one to show up. And it wasn't long after I was in a recovery facility in the woods of Connecticut, where I was introduced to some the 12 steps and a spiritual path, and I just really was ready. When I saw, that there was another way, that there was a way out, that things could be better as a course, there's got to be a better way. I took to it like, people back east used to say, I took to it like a duck to water. I was all in, and I was that way with everything in my life. For moments I would be, full speed in one direction, but now my direction was turned towards inward, towards this journey. And it was very quick for me. 2 weeks into this recovery facility, I had a profound experience, which I would later read in the Course in Miracles as revelation. And from that moment, nothing was ever the same. I never went back to work. I left on a Friday, and I never returned to my normal life. I stayed on the East Coast for about a year to repair some of the relationships, the close ones, my brother and my parents. And then I moved on. I was being called to something, much different. And I spent time in spiritual community. I got married in spiritual community. I traveled the world with some of the people there. And then a few years ago, I started hearing prison ministry in my mind. And so I shared that with the ones I trusted, and it had led me to Nevada. I was looking looking to go to California, but the ones I joined with, they weren't hearing that. And the spot I wanted to pick, fortunately, I didn't go because it's literally burnt down now. But the ones I trusted were hearing Nevada, and we came out here and we visited for a day, and I found a place out here. And so that's where my journey began with this prison ministry. And I've been traveling the country doing that. And that's kind of how I got here, I guess, all by the surrender to the spirit.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we might want to look at your prison ministry, because that's something that I don't know. I don't know that many people who work in prison ministry. I have heard of some, though, and spoken to some. So I'd like to hear more about it.
Sure. So I was actually at a Course in Miracles convention in San Francisco. I was there in support of David Hoffmeister, who I lived with for quite a few years. And while I was there is when I started to hear this. And I had actually met this guy, Joe Wolf, who did some of this back when he was around, but he was from Florida, and I had met him actually the same weekend I met David Hoffmeister in Manhattan at a Course in Miracles convention 7 years ago. But this one was in San Francisco, and I had started to hear it. And then people came up to me, and they started saying, "Hey, I hear you're going to take over Joe Wolf's ministry." And I was like, "Really?" Like, so my reflections were talking to me and telling me what I didn't know yet. So it was quite an experience to have that happen. But it was a little while later that a prisoner from Ohio wrote to David, and I just felt a connection with this guy. His name is Dale Crow, and he's serving over 20 years in Chillicothe Correctional Institution in Ohio. So I wrote to him, and that's when I started to explore these ideas and share them with David and the ones around me. And it all started with my relationship with Dale. We started, talking daily, exchanging letters, and then a fellowship grew up around him, and I was able to start visiting him. So I'm actually going out again in 2 weeks. I go out every 2 months, and it's expanded to Texas and Indiana and in the surrounding areas of Ohio, because I'm able to do one-on-ones in other states. In Nevada, where I live, I'm able to bring the message into a classroom, but I can't speak one-on-one to the individual inmates. So Nevada's kind of reserved for that, which is opening up again since the COVID. But the COVID was a blessing because I was able to create these one-on-one relationships with the ones in Ohio, London, Ohio, Chillicothe, Ohio, Texas, and all the surrounding areas. And, but like I said, it all started with, Dale, when he calls, we have calls pretty much every day. And when he calls, we just go directly into what's in the mind, just like we were living in a community. He just happens to be in a prison right now. And I write on my website that he treats it like a monastery. He's reading the course daily. He actually now is head of programming in the entire prison. He has 2-3 classes a week where people come in to hear his teaching what he would learn. And so I do the same thing with Dale. And, we just go straight into what's on our mind. I'll say, hey, this is where I'm at, whether it's something with, it doesn't matter, with my wife or with a relationship I have here. When I speak from the heart to him, it just resonates. He's like, I'm going through the same thing with, someone else in the prison. And then we were able to, start to say, okay, and then we look to the course for the solution or whatever comes to us, and we pray together. Really, this path has become for me. I heard this in Brazil when I was in Brazil with actually David and Francis, who had been with the ministry for a long time. And it was, wait, all I want is to hear together. I just want to hear the same voice with people. I don't really want to do anything. I just want to be able to hear together, because the course tells me there's one voice speaking to us all. And I've even practiced that in the 12 steps. They have, the structure of a sponsor, and, you pray with a sponsor about, actions or steps in your life. And so that has just, developed. And so me and Dale do that, and then it extends. And now I've, quite a few 30 relationships with inmates that call me. Some have a appointment once a week that fits for them. Some call when they're available. Some I work with on different aspects. And, I got a guy calling this afternoon. He calls every Wednesday at 3:00. And I was just writing a post about this guy before we did this. And this guy has really, his transformation is just incredible. When I first met him, he's doing 51 years for a nonviolent crime. And so he went in at 19. And so he has a deep belief that he was unfairly treated, which the course says, beware of the temptation to perceive others or myself as unfairly treated. So when I visit him, we go into these beliefs, and, and he's open, and he's like, he wants to see things a different way. And I'll actually read something right here that I have on my screen. He wrote this to me just the other day, and it just made me, feel so good that I wanted to share it with others. So I'm writing a post about it. But he writes, his name's Rob Morris. He's doing some time in London correctional facility. He says, all right, dude, that was the major news from my end. I'm just happy. Here's a guy doing 51 years, and his news is, I'm just happy. He says, I'm able to soak up some of this positivity that is floating around me lately. Or was it always, capital? Or was it always there, just waiting for me to open myself up and be able to receive the miracles that are up for grabs by everyone? I'm telling you, bro, just having this new epic journey with Sock, and he refers to his intuition as Sock from The Peaceful Warrior. Having this new epic journey with Sock waiting nearby does crazy stuff, man. Take care, and as always, safe travels. Much love to you and yours, Rob. And so, this is what activates me now when I have this connection with another human being that seems to be in a prison halfway across the country. But actually, when I speak from my heart and share what's going on in my mind, they respond and they can relate. And so that's kind of how the prison ministry started, how I started to hear it. It started through that one relationship, and it has grown. I'm going out in 2 weeks to Chillicothe, Ohio. I'm actually driving out from Utah out to Ohio this time. And I'll be visiting with, every time I go, there's more, because guys just keep showing up with Dale's class. They just start getting activated themselves, and then he turns them on to me, and we start connecting. And then I either write letters, or there's online ways to communicate now. And, the first time I went, I just visited Dale. the second time. I might have done that twice. And then it was 4 guys. And then it was 8 guys. And then it was 10 guys. And this time it'll probably be 12 or 14 guys. And, I actually start creating these holy relationships with the guards. And they're like, Jeff's back, and they know I come in the morning and afternoon sessions and just, start create relationships with the chaplains and the people there to just start carrying this message, that I was so freely given. So that's kind of how it happened.
Wow, amazing. I have one question before we go on. How are you allowed to say the names of these people on a podcast?
I am.
Because
Yeah,
you
in
said
fact,
some names.
yeah. In
Just
fact,
wanted to
on
be
my
sure.
Sure. Yeah. In fact, on my website, I have what's called so my website is last-step.org. And when you go on there, there's an about section, and it says our team. And when you click on our team, it shows all the inmates, and it gives you their mailing address. So if I write a post that something resonated and you want to connect, these guys are just hungry to to extend and to hear about people's miracles and to share their own. And so I have their contact, and I've gotten all their permission to post things online, and they're more than happy. They're thrilled. I share about these guys, and then when I tell them, about it's having a practical experience. You can hear that a butterfly flaps its wings and, whatever it is, Thailand, and I forget the saying, and it's felt somewhere else. But when they hear about, hey, I shared this about you I shared something when I was on a podcast, and then people are calling me from around the world, and I say, hey man, someone in England or, Dublin, they know about you. And they're like, what? And then they start experiencing it within their own prison, that they start to see these things show up. So yeah, so it's quite fine that their names are used and heard. I've passed it by them.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure before I publish something that shouldn't be there. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The podcast is at present heard in 51 countries, so you can tell them that.
I will.
Yeah. So let's continue on that. So you go there, you speak with these people, and you go deep into the topic of what's on their minds, right? And on your mind. And that has a very deep
Absolutely.
healing effect for everyone involved, right? I get that right?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. That's right on. And as you know, that you practice the course, it's all for me and my own healing. But these are the relationships that are given, and the ones show up. I go there and seeing it's my mind. But I'll tell you, I've sat with some guys that are in, this one guy in particular, Oscar. He may never get out. He's in for life. And we sit, from the first time I met this guy, we were just in tears for half of the, and I'm sharing core stuff, and he's got this thing now. He goes around his prison. He just says, God is. And his friends say, period. And they all are cheering, sharing these teachings. But yeah, we go into, some of them, as you can imagine, their life in prison, they have extreme forgiveness opportunities. Not that there's degrees of miracle in forgiveness, but they seem to have these things, like the guy I just shared. He's in for 51 years for a nonviolent crime. And so he has a difficulty with that belief about being unfairly treated. And others, there's things that they've done that are perceived by the world that are very, extreme. And so we go into it and we talk about, some of them have done victim panels with, some have done to their family, and their families have come in for victim panels. And a lot of these guys are able to open up in a way with me. I'm just, I was given this path. I was actually pretty much in training since 8 years ago, started to hold the space for people, and the space of non-judgment that the course shows us how to do, and practice true empathy, not to see these guys as different. And then they feel that, and they're able to open up and share some of the emotions that maybe they never got to before. And then we look at the beliefs and start to question them. And every time they start to have experiences, and it is actually really amazing to watch some of these guys. This guy Michael, to watch him light up when he starts to share, second time I talk to him, first time we start to get our feet wet. And then when they start to get into the depth of this, they're like, oh man, everything you're talking about, it's happening to me, the synchronicities and all these things. And it's, I don't, I don't aim to teach, I aim to demonstrate the best I can. And I say, don't take my word for it. Experiment with the truth, like practice, try this out. And then it doesn't matter, the whole point, it doesn't matter our environment. And they have seemingly a lot of them have a lot of free time, while they're there to focus their mind on this stuff. And so, yeah, it's been quite a blessing to be able to go to the depth with these guys.
Yeah, this is very deep stuff. When I think about being a prisoner of certain ways of thinking or even material ways of experience, like you were saying, you stopped working in a regular job 8 years ago, which is a huge thing to do, right? And that's like, did you experience your previous life like a prison or something?
I would have to say yes. I actually, I worked in a family business in a small town. And actually, the work environment that I was in, I worked in a sheet metal shop. So if no one has ever been into a sheet metal shop, there's no windows, and so especially, I suffered from dependence on alcohol and drugs. So I didn't see the light of day for pretty much the entire winter months. I would go to work at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was pitch black, and I'd work inside all day, and then I'd go home in the pitch black. And so that was just a reflection of where my mind was at. Yeah, I mean, that's where, certainly there's thoughts about, I was in a prison of my own mind at the time. But yeah, every step that I took of letting go of, whatever it was, a job and those things. And, that was me facing my own fears at the time to open up to what he would have me do. And all that has been used with these guys. And yeah, it's definitely, there's some, and I've never actually spent time inside of a prison, so I have to relate it to the prison of my mind and where I was at in a small town or a sheet metal shop or what have you. And so then it becomes relatable when I speak on that level.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I was listening to lectures by anthropologists who spoke of their experience in school as incarceration, which was pretty fascinating. How they use the language of being a prisoner for their experience in boarding school. So that was
Mm,
interesting. Just as a
yeah,
reflection on the fact that we all are prisoners of our own mind when we don't allow ourselves to open up to love, right?
sure. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of people who go through things that they feel are like prison, but of course it's not the actual prison in the sense of the
Mm,
walls of a prison where you were incarcerated for something or other. But are
yeah.
getting in your own, you are locking yourselves up to so much, from so much, right? That is there for you, within you.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we take it to the ultimate sense, time is the biggest prison of all, and that's probably what I focus on with these guys the most, because being in that environment, the most common thing is I'll be happy when I'm released or when I'm paroled. So some of the guys seem, to open up maybe quicker in my perception, that have life. This guy Oscar, he started a thing, Lifers with Purpose, because he knows he's never, so he doesn't have that illusion that something's going to be better in the future. And so it's interesting for them. But the guys, and I've had guys, just recently, I mean, it's continual that they're up for parole. And so we work on watching the mind, about the thoughts, like, hey, we need to let go of expectations about am I going to be paroled? And seemingly, again, and these things are very difficult, but I try to teach what I would learn is there's no degree of difficulty in it. And, but there's such an expectation, I want to get out. And then, we look at this And I have several guys that just went up for parole and they got refused, and they've been in, some of them for a long time. Some of them are in for 6 years and they're coming up, and they actually come up every year. And then, next year it could be another. And so it's like I said, I'm teaching the same things that I want to learn. And the course teaches me and promises me the immediacy of salvation, and you have cause for happiness now. And we go into that and they start to get glimmers of it and they're like, wow. And so that's what, we use everything that shows up in their environment. And, some Dale actually has an automatic out date. The one that I spoke of that this started with, me and Dale Crow, he has an automatic out date. But then just recently he got up for a judicial review. And so we together looked at all the thoughts like, well, and, he's very into his function and his purpose. So it was, there was an acceptance. There was some frustration, of course, when he went and everybody said yes, except for the victim's family showed up and objected. And so the prosecutor and the judge said, okay, we're going to have him do the remainder, at least half of the remainder of his time, which he has 4 years left because he's been in for about 20 years. And he has this, okay, my function's not done here. I got all these guys and we're starting this whole prison ministry. Maybe I'm supposed to be here. And, that shows up. But then also it's like, I give him the space to, well, share your frustration. Don't ghost over and say that. I mean, well, that it may be true in the ultimate sense. And so he was able to get in touch with some of the anger around, the family or whatever it was. But it's just, he actually said to me right away, he's like, man, I must have more forgiveness to do. I thought I forgave. I go, yeah, that's common. We all think we've forgiven some, but it stops coming back into our awareness when we completely forgive it. The Course teaches us that, once it's forgiven, we don't have to experience those things anymore. So it's just another example of that time piece, that. And I know guys that have been in solitary, and there's a guy, Brandon, who he literally had his spiritual experience in solitary confinement. So he was, all elements of time, and even the, if you want to call it, luxuries that you can have inside, with the commissary and, outside time and the gym and all that. He had none of that. And it forced him to go much deeper inward, and he had a spiritual experience. And then he started calling me, and, and I shared some of my experiences just so that he had something to relate to. But yeah, that's the ultimate prison, is time that we're all trying to escape from.
Yeah. You were also speaking about addiction, right? To drugs. And what came to my mind in A Course in Miracles, it says the only addiction we have is to guilt. So how do you relate to that?
Yeah. I think as I started off, I had this allegiance to the ego, which is basically the belief in guilt that I separated from God, which is what time is. The belief in guilt. It's all, this addiction to guilt. Judgment, same thing. It's all, relatable in that sense. For me, it's actually probably easier to identify when I hear those words, because of the cycle I was in that brought me to self-destruction. I was crushed by a self-imposed crisis, and seeing that it was my own shame and guilt that was driving me. It was like I kept thinking I had a choice, so it all comes back to this idea of choice for me, that I believe I have a choice in form. And then of these illusions, which do I prefer, when it's all, the illusion of choice. But even that choice, that's why the rules for decision, I focus on that with a lot of guys and myself daily, because when I let go of the belief that I'm deciding, and I can step back from, I will make no decisions myself today, for me, that's the release from guilt. Because when I make a decision myself, and I was given this path of 12 steps with a sponsor, just me joining with a sponsor in prayer relieves myself of believing that I'm making choices. So I'm relieving myself of that guilt by joining with a brother. Jesus tells us where two or more are joined. And now I've strengthened that through community living and still connecting with the ones that I know there. And then with the people I work with in prison, I practice the same thing. Hey, let's pray about that, whether guys have, funds they want to do something with, or regardless of what the topic is, it's like coming to this present moment to hear together, to alleviate that idea that I'm doing, this autonomy that I believe I have, that I have this little space between birth and death to do with what I want. That's my whole problem. That's the generator for me of guilt. So when I hear those words, the addiction to guilt, it resonates deeply because of my past and having the addiction problems and that shame that just kept, coming back. And then ultimately seeing, oh my God, I was a puppet. I didn't have a choice every time there was a drug or drink before me. I was just reacting to something. So yeah, so that line resonates, very deeply. And the other part of the course that, is very helpful for me with that is, the misdirected miracle impulse, that it was all my desire for God. you know, I hear someone share the line that everything is the inappropriate desire to be at one with God, regardless if it's sex addiction, drugs, alcohol. We can take it all the way. Breathing, anything that I think I need or desire for is just, and it's a false cause and effect thing, but it's like, it's actually the inappropriate desire for me to be at one with God. Deep down under all the layers, that's what's driving me, is this, this true desire for the peace of God.
Yeah, I like that. The peace of God. And that's the ultimate um, acceptance, right, of who we are.
Hmm.
Yeah, and of course, the miracle says that's the only thing we actually need.
Hmm.
Anyways,
Yeah,
to accept.
that's that's it. The peace of God is my one goal.
Yep. So yeah, we all are struggling with similar things to what you're describing as issues for prisoners. Like, I'll be happy if I get this, things will be wonderful, and this and that, right?
Hmm.
That's not just a prisoner's issue, I must say.
Yeah, yeah. It's a common theme in the mind that somewhere in the future is where my salvation lies, when, Christ is teaching me the immediacy of salvation, that, what I'd shared, the cause, I have a cause for happiness now, trying to go to this holy instant. And, that's the way to it is by this, joining with a brother and praying together and exposing the thoughts. And, when this other guy, Jared, that I work with inside, he was another one, man. When I sat down with him, this guy is 6'6", 300 and something pounds. And he comes in and, most of these guys look pretty intimidating. And I just feel their heart. Even the first time I met Dale walked in the room and my heart just was like, oh, I had this, some people I see, I have a reference to people from my past. And he reminded me of my Uncle Joe. And I just felt his heart. And I was like, oh my God. And this guy Jared came in, and and there was no words to start. He just started crying. This big guy, and he's in for 30 something years, and he just sat and just cried, and he had all this gratitude just for this guy who doesn't know him showing up. And meanwhile, I'm grateful that this guy would even see me. So there's this, I've been just coming into a deeper sense, even on the last trip I made, of what the course talks about, and practically experiencing the appreciation is from the worthy to the worthy, that the course talks about. And I'm just touching on that to a degree that, like, makes my heart like really swell when I get into those moments, and it's like, whoa, it's not what I expected. This whole allegiance to the ego makes me think so much, so many other things are true, but it's really trying to see the Christ in my brother. And yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, that must be really powerful when I think of it, because even if you're not in prison, to see each other as the Christ is quite a challenge when you are not allowing yourself to do that.
Hmm. Yeah, that brings up something else, Wanako, is I shared this in a post that I made recently, or last month after my last visit. And what you just said is that, it is difficult even in day-to-day life. And for me, I've realized it's because of the distractions. When I go and sit with a prisoner, I'm in full focus, and I try to focus all day long in everything I do. But this is more like, even with phone calls, when a phone call comes in from Dale or whomever, it literally, the line says, "You have a call coming from this." So it's like everything else in my life drops. I get a call from someone I know. Do I give as much attention as when this recording comes on? Maybe not. So it's causing me to transfer the training that I'm doing with these guys to everyone. And so the call is like, okay. And then we talk, and I have a set amount of time, 15 minutes. Not only that, when I'm mid-sentence, the recording will come out and say, "This call is being recorded by the," and so I have to pause and then check back in, like, okay, is this what I really want to be sharing? Is this really what's on my heart right now? And then when I sit with these guys, it's the same thing. I go in and, I have 3 hours most of the time, sometimes 2 or 3 with these guys. And I go in and I'm sitting waiting. So I have a specific amount of time, and I'm sitting waiting. So there's this heightened focus for me of prayer. And okay, some guys I had never seen before, and they're going to walk in for the first time. I once stood up and it was the wrong guy. And I was like, okay. And then, he walked by me. I was like, all right, that's not the guy I'm seeing, because I don't see a lot of them before the first time we sit together. And then I'm in prayer, and I use that prayer. You show me who this is. You tell me who my guest is, because I don't know. He's going to walk in. I'm going to see a toothless, tattooed, big, what other ethnicity they are. And I don't want that. I want to see the Christ in my brother. And when I sit and I pray like that, and, listen to, in my mind, repeat that holy relationship, as I see him, I see myself. That was what my whole post was about. And it works. I sit there, and then this guy walks in, and it's like, I don't even ask these guys about why they're there. Some of them end up sharing it with me, sometimes in the first session, sometimes later on. But it's not even like it matters. Now we're there for a holy purpose. It's not about the past. I'm trying to drop the past of my brother so that, ultimately he's doing the same. But it's like, I had this other experience with a guy who I found out what he had done prior to meeting him. And Dale had told me, he's like, "Oh yeah, this is kind of an infamous case." And he told me, and I had someone staying at my house, and I went into the room, and they asked me, when I said he's in for the rest of his life, "Who are you talking to?" I said, "This guy." And she said, "What's he in for?" And when I told her, the words came out, and I told her, and it felt like I was lying. I was like, that's not true. Like, I don't even believe what I'm saying right now, because I don't know this guy as that. And I was like, it didn't even feel true, when supposedly in the realm of time, he seemingly did those things. But for me, it was an experience of that's not actually true. I don't know. He hasn't done those things. And then, of course, when I met him and the relationship started, it was like, there's this, I can't picture a lot of these guys in that, which is just insanity. It's the, allegiance to the ego, where, I could have very well ended up in the same place with some of the thoughts and close calls that I had.
Yeah, that's an important thing, that you actually can relate to pretty much anyone, right? And in your particular case, you've found a way of relating to people who are in prison as the world sees it.
Mm. Yeah, that's very, yeah, it's very, very helpful. And even my 12-step background had kind of prepared me for that as well, because I sponsored some guys that were, essentially had pasts where they were, gangbangers or whatever it was. And it was like, Spirit was just using me for, for his purposes. And it's led me to this. And yeah.
So were you ever afraid of what you're doing, or how did that develop? Because I can imagine that you might have been scared when you first heard Spirit telling you to have a prison
Sure.
ministry.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Monaco. Um, Initially, I got invited to speak in prison in Connecticut, when this was in that first year that I spoke of. I was repairing the relationships back east before I moved out west. And I was asked to go into prison there. And that was a max security in Connecticut. And I did. Back then, I had a lot of fear showed up. And then I wasn't allowed in because my uncle, the guy I told you about, Uncle Joe, was in there. And so they wouldn't allow you in if you had a relative in the prison. So I wasn't able to do that. So I did go to some juvenile places and speak and do those things and carry the message. But initially there was, and I had a thought then, like, wow, it was this weird thing in my mind, because there was a bit of an attraction to it, but there was a fear. And then when after I started hearing it, I guess there was a fear in you know, the old, are you sure, you know, to JC, are you sure you got the right guy here? You know, that like the I couldn't do it. As far as maybe it was softened by my relationship with Dale, that I never actually experienced fear going in or in each relationship. Um, and there might be moments of that when I'm in that prayer of the guys, a new guy coming in, of but not of the person really. So yeah, I don't know that I can identify that consciously, that there's a fear there. But maybe there is, you know, some kind of anticipation that happens with new guys, that might be a reflection or a remnant of that same thought, that are you sure you got the right guy thing. But yeah, so initially there was, and maybe to that degree, but that's something for me to keep in mind. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, that's an amazing topic, because I and many others, when you get the message to do something with spirit, right? You're like, did you really choose the right person? Right. It's simple. It simply is a question that comes to mind again
Mm,
and again when you're asked to do something.
yeah, yeah, and even to that, it's that I've noticed for myself as this has happened and seemingly grown into something, that it was all anticipation, you know, that I would have to actually do something, you know, that false responsibility that shows up. I literally don't feel like I did much to start this prison ministry. Did I learn how to do a website and that stuff? Sure. You know, those types of things, but it all literally feels like it is happening for me, you know, it's like by me. It's like I don't even really, you know, the relationship was given with Dale, and then it's actually inspiration that has been leading the way. It's like I'm inspired to get movies into prison, and so I call the guy, and then this guy says, "Yeah, you can send them here," and now I can send movies straight to Dale, and he can have his own little. He runs. He's head of programming. He has his own little thing with a bunch of books. We got David books. We got Course in Miracle books in his little room. He's got his own little storage space. And now we're starting to funnel in movies so that he can play movies at his class. And it's like where the inspiration seems to come in this, it just happens. It opens up. And that was part of what I shared, that I think COVID was a blessing for me, because I was trying to, at the beginning, it was that fear was showing up as interest. Okay, how can I do this? And it was, okay, let me set up. And I did make the contacts with the Nevada prisons and the chaplains, and that all went great. But then COVID came and it stopped. I was like, okay, what would you have me do now? And it was this one-on-one stuff, because that's actually where I want to be too, is deeper in the mind with one's questioning their beliefs, so I can look at my own thoughts around all of this stuff. So yeah, it has been quite a blessing to see it just unfold, as you know, as I let go of the responsibility, is how it seems to happen.
Yeah, I have a question about the one-on-one. You say that you can reflect on your own thoughts that way. Is it is it true that when you listen to someone else going through all these thoughts in their minds and all these issues, that you are kinder to them that you than you would have been to yourself if it had been just you in the room?
Hmm. That's possible. I never considered that. You know, it's this all actually, when I really think about this, just started with a relationship with a guy back east who was who had just, I met him the day he got out of prison. He walked into a 12-step room and I felt this connection with him. And I had a profound miracle with him when he actually shared his uh his story with me. And it was one of the things that society deems as the worst, even people in prison. consider the people that have committed or seem to commit this crime to be the worst of the worst. And when he shared it with me, I was in my house. It was in my living room when he did this, and I had the most profound experience. I mean, because it's the same thing as with this other guy I was sharing when someone else told me what he did. When he told me what he had done, I didn't think it was it. I didn't actually think it was true. Like, I was looking him in the eye, and man, he's got these soft blue eyes, and I had already felt a connection with him. And there was no thoughts. If anything, there was an identification. Not that I had ever acted on thoughts or whatever, murderous thoughts or, rape thoughts or whatever they are, but I'd seen them go through my mind. In fact, when I had my revelatory experience, you know, you can't explain seeing the face of God or whatever, the great rays, and it's beyond explanation. But let me tell you, I've tried to explain to people the return to this realm, and it was horrifying because it was all my beliefs coming back into my mind, and all those. I mean, you name the worst thoughts that could possibly go through the mind, and I saw them all. And it was like, fortunately, I had some kind of minimal understanding that it wasn't me or it wasn't my thoughts, because I'd never seen them before. And I was like, what is this? I mean, you name it. And I don't want to get too into it on this podcast, but when I saw those thoughts, I was like, oh my God, and I started to get an understanding. I got a pretty quick crash course in the metaphysics of the course before I'd even found the book about, the egoic mind and the filters and all this stuff and the upside down world. And I was like, the identification, and I was like, oh my God, that's not me. So, well, if they're not me, they're not anyone else either, whether or not they seem to act on them or not. So when this guy shared that was my first experience of a pretty deep, what in the 12 steps you would call a fifth step, when they share their darkest secrets with you. And it wasn't a formal one, but when he shared that, I had this different experience. It wasn't like I even thought it was true or thought like there was no judgment. It was just like this. It's just the miracle. I was in the miracle, not even by my own doing. I just don't even know how it happened. And, from that moment with a lot of these other guys, it doesn't seem to come up. But I think your question was, would I be harder on myself for those things? And, that experience that I had, this revelation, I was hard on myself for 39 years, and I had thought I did the worst things and whatever it was. But when I had, revelation for me was nothing more than seeing my innocence. And when that was seen, it's just nothing but tears of gratitude to see that I was wrong about everything. So while I still have healing to do in certain areas of my mind, I don't have those thoughts don't even come up really with in regards to myself or the guys with those types of things that they share.
Yeah, because many people think that they're much meaner to themselves than to anyone else, which I'm very interesting thing, because in A Course in Miracles, it certainly doesn't say that. Because it says whatever you are thinking is expressed, right, in one way or another.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, it's back to that holy encounter section, that how I treat my brother, how I look at him, and how I think of my brother is how I think of myself. So ultimately, there's no difference in the end of how I think of him or if I'm thinking of myself. But I mean, that becomes the practice, is you show me who he is, because, the continued practice of letting go of my own interpretations of who I think I am. I mean, I'm so far off the mark. I've proven it time and time again that I don't even try. But with others, it's like there seems to be something outside of me that I can quantify. And it's like, no, I have to continue to look beyond that and just continue to ask for that interpretation. So, yeah, so goes the journey.
So there's so much more we could talk about, but now I would like to allow anyone who wants to ask a question or comment to do so.
Hi, Jeffrey. Thank you for all your inspirational words. I wonder, you sound very uplifted, and I wonder how you do self-care and how you keep your spirits up and, are amidst all these very difficult situations. How do you keep yourself uplifted?
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, the instant answer that comes is staying, connected with others, that I don't try to do this myself. I have a pretty good, a big network of people that know what goes on with me. I don't spend a lot of time in isolation. I make sure that, I'm speaking to people every day. So and again, this is a practice that I learned through the pathways that I've been privileged to find. And so that piece, staying connected to others and exposing whatever comes into my mind when I have someone else that there is an obstacle. In fact, I had one this morning show up. I have someone coming to stay, and I noticed something, like a thought come into my mind, like, oh, I better be careful. And I was like, wait, I don't like that thought. And so I was like, okay, what's there? And then when I saw what was going on, I have to call that person immediately and clear that. Hey, this is what's going on in my mind. I want to see this differently. I practice those things in my relationships, because the 12 steps and the Course in Miracles for me are paths of healing through relationships. And so I focus on those, whatever ones show up in my life, whether they're prisoners or neighbors or people that I meet in the towns I'm in. I use that, the way the Course talks about. I was once sitting in Camas, Utah, and I was talking to an old friend, and it was just a feeling in my heart of letting go of the specialness that I had had with him. And so I was guided to the library, and I pulled this book off the shelf, which I'd never read since. And that was the only time. And I just opened it up, and there was one line in it, and it said, "I am held here by the gravity of my unhealed relationships." And I was like, wow, that means I need to heal my relationships. So I try not to avoid those things. And when I move towards those things in my life with friends, my parents or whatever, which I don't speak to often, but if something does come up, I would speak to them, or my wife, or, people that I deal with in my prison ministry. I move towards it, and so that's probably the initial answer of how I stay, or try to stay in a practice or in an uplifted state, which is really just the transfer of training that I was talking about earlier from the Course. And then I do other things. I wake up very early, and I have sections of the Course that I repeat every morning. I, I read them over and over, and that seems to keep me in a place of consistency. And that's really what my goal is, to have a consistent state of mind. And while exposing all this stuff, I practice the rules for decision. I practice setting the goal, which is really part of the rules for decision. And, there's certain sections that I just go back to each morning, and I wake up sometimes 4 o'clock, 4:30, and I sit until I feel the presence. I'm not getting up. I don't have anything else to do. This is like I had shared, the peace of God is my one goal, my purpose and my function in my life while I abide, the aim of all my living here, while I abide where I am not at home. Well, I need to take that and use it for my day. If I think I need to go work out, or I need to worry about what I have to eat first, it's like, no, I got to get right with my internal guide here. And so I sit, and I have these sections that I kind of review, that the problem and the answer is a big one for me. I read that section, and every time it does the trick for me, because it literally has, for me, all the answers in there. Do I want the problem or the answer? Become like little children, he says. I forget to ask. When I think I know, I forget to ask. But a little child doesn't forget to ask. He sees ghosts and all this. And so those sections, I have certain ones that resonate deeply with me that I just go back to. And then that gets me set. That gets me set for the day, so that I'm willing to do what I talked about first, that I'm willing to move towards the conflict in my mind, or towards the obstacles that may be appearing in my relationships. So hopefully that answered your question, Julie.
Yeah, I think when you listen to your inner guide and you follow the advice, that means you're taking care of yourself. That means you're taking care of whatever it is to keep yourself in a good place. whether it's sleeping or exercising, or you said, when you're at this place, everything kind of flows, and you're in the
Sure.
moment. And so I assume you said you didn't have to work, so you just trust that that all works out, or does it work out because you're being in this authentic place and your needs are being met? I mean, I'm just curious about that, because so many of us struggle to work. We have to
Sure.
work. We have to work.
So yeah, that's a great question. And so yeah, what I was sharing was essentially how I stay in a state of removing the obstacles so that I can hear that that voice on a consistent basis. And another piece of that is sharing with others to say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. What do you feel? And then getting clear on that so that I can move in that direction. And then I have experiences like I shared at the beginning this morning, where I'm in activation, or the way I talk about it, or I'm in this uplifted state of vibration or in purpose, however you want to describe it. So yeah, that's the ultimate thing, is just listening to that voice. And so for me, that has been the answer. And, I am provided for when I follow the voice for God. When I walked out of my, so I worked, as I had shared, for 22 years for a family business, and it wasn't easy for me to walk out. Now, I said I left on a Friday. I went to recovery, had revelation. I realized that the world's not what I thought, and so, but I still had to face the relationship with my father and disappointing the one man I was trying to get his approval my entire life. So that was a healing process, but I was intent on following this path or calling, or the internal guide that was telling me there's something else to my life. And so I'm shown miracles each step that I take. And, the course even talks about, I need a whole bunch of miracles to convince me. It's the spirit's job to convince me. I just have to show up and ask and continue to do the work. And so I went in, and the day that I actually quit my job, my father wasn't sure that I was coming back to work or not. And I went in and I sat with my father and my business partner at the time. There was three of us, and I sat down and I just looked them both in the eyes and I said, listen, I'm never coming back. There's something else for me in this lifetime, and I can't come back. And when I spoke from my heart, my biggest fear is reaction, or people aren't going to like me, or certainly it was much more powerful back then, 8 years ago. I was shown nothing but love. Like, they literally supported me. They continued to pay me for a year. For me, that was what divine providence looked like. But then it was the symbols that showed up. When I faced this biggest fear of leaving my lifetime career, I walked out the door, and I was no more than 6 steps from the front door going to my car, and I get a message on my phone. It buzzes, and I look at it, and it's a voice message. And I sit in my car. I had just quit my job of my entire life to my father, and I sat in the car. And this is a guy I hadn't heard from in 3 or 4 years at this point. And I play the message, and his message said, hey, I just wanted to give you a call. I know I haven't spoken to you in a long time, but I just got out of an interview with Forbes magazine, and they asked me, it makes me emotional. They asked me, who do you know that missed their calling in this life? And he said, you were at the top of the list. And this was his message to me. And now, did I go follow business or that? No. But for me in that moment, it meant the world. This was God speaking to me saying, you're going to be fine. You don't need, to provide for yourself in the way that you thought, or to take this way. And, it has been nothing but those miracles as I've moved along the path. And each time something shows up. Got a little feedback. Each time something shows up, whether it's, moving out here. I moved out here, and I bought this house that I'm living in. And when I came with Dave, and we were traveling only for a day, and we looked at like 6 houses, and this house was like, okay, yeah, the price and this. And I went back and I said, Dave, I really feel this one house with my heart. And he's like, okay. And we just kind of prayed together. And so I called the guy. And when I called him, I said, hey, I'd like to make an offer on one of the houses. He goes, oh, before you make an offer, he goes, this one just dropped 60 grand. I was like, well, let me drop my what I'm going to offer. And so those types of things keep showing up. So it's just like, divine providence looks different for all different types of people. And, little things show up as well. As soon as I feel to donate money to whatever, I go and do that, and then a check shows up in my mailbox from the government or something. And it's like, but it continually happens when I continue to question the belief that I have to provide for myself, or that literally all I have to do is follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And so when I face those fears, he just shows me flags all along the way saying, keep going. You're fine. There's nothing you need to do.
That's really inspirational. I'm a psychotherapist, and I work very hard with people on listening to their inner voice and their guidance. And it really is true. Once people start living from that place of truth without fear, I've seen it, things start working out. But we get so stuck, in fear and not thinking we're going to have enough or whatever, that you can't see from that higher perspective. So it's you're an inspiration to me, because it's a daily struggle, for us to stay in that place of thinking.
Thank you, Julie.
I also, my name is Elena. I also want to ask you. Maybe it's not ask. It's just my appreciation for everything what you do. That Jeffrey, that all your you kind of model for lots of people, that with people who have addiction, and for I think everybody have all kind of addictions. It doesn't matter what we addict to anything in this life. There is, and you're kind of model for all people. For me include that your life, it's what you've done in your life and what you do now, and especially for matter that I worked for Department of Corrections. So I stopped work in 2019, Department of Corrections, Washington State, and I just speaking from my heart. I very appreciate what you do, because I worked in the Department of Corrections, and I see lots of volunteers and lots of people who was working here with open heart. And this is people, they just like angels. They are just so amazing. That I remember when I usually go to work in the morning, and sometimes if we have some special event in prison, and there was like hundreds of volunteers, they come in, they just, it's amazing people. They are super kind, super passionate for what they do, and it's just you're one of them. Of course, with your ministry, and you're doing a lot, and I just appreciate for what you do from bottom of my heart, because I know what that mean, what you do. I know, and I feel my heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eliana.
Yes.
Wow. We're going deeper, huh? The next question might be a little different in tone, because I would like to ask you about your writing. You said you write posts and you share about these things in writing. How does that work for you?
Yeah, so it kind of works the same way. Whenever my heart expands, or with a interaction, or a letter, or what have you, or my own forgiveness opportunity. Typically that's what drives a lot of it, is when there's a shift in my own mind, or I see something differently than I maybe did the day before. but that's accompanied by this expansion. Then that's the moment I know it's time to it's time to get this out. And I admittedly probably don't do it as much as I should. I actually have a lot of those things go on, and I tend to think that I have other things to do. And then every time that I write or I share, I shared on my website, which doesn't get a lot of traffic because I don't really promote it or anything, but I'll put it on Facebook, and I have a few friends, and then the reflections I get from that are overwhelming, and this is maybe even a prompt for me to start sharing it to a little bit more frequency. And the ones that I get, because I write down like a note a lot of times, like, oh, I should share this one, and then seemingly travel or what have you may come in the come between it. But yeah, that's usually how it shows up. It'll be like, as soon as I read something that this one I just said, that this guy Rob, and sometimes I'll read it to someone else, and they'll be my reflection. They'll say, you need to post that. And I'll be like, yeah, you're right. Whether I had heard it before or not. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I should probably do that. And so, yeah, it's kind of a good reminder. But yeah, it comes from that. It comes from the heart, if there's an expansion, or I feel something with something that someone writes me, or our interact. Certainly after I make a trip out there, I almost always have to share about what went on. So yeah, that's kind of the answer, I think.
Yeah, the reason I ask about writing is because we all are writers here, and we meet regularly to write together. So we're very interested in other people's writing processes as well, and where they get their inspiration from.
Yeah, my stuff is very brief too. I kind of just try to stay to the point, and because I know from my own thing, I don't like to read a lot of if I'm reading a post or something, I don't like to go on for a while. So I try to get straight to the heart of it pretty quickly. And I kind of write from my own vernacular, my own point of view. So it comes through the character Jeffrey a little as well.
Yeah, I think we're all, connecting in that way. It's the character and the spirit that join in these sharing, because that's the way it's supposed to be, because of our special function, I believe. Because otherwise the character wouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I see it all the time. Want to go with the guys that I work with, because even the little bit I read to you from this guy Rob, there's a way that we communicate that still comes through the character Jeffrey, that I can communicate to these guys in a way that maybe some others wouldn't be comfortable with, or what have you. But this relationship I have with this guy Rob, it started out with talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, and I had to freshen up a little because I hadn't watched sports in about 8 years. So I had to look at a few highlights, so I knew who was playing. Not a single person was still playing the game that when I watched. And so, but I used it as a backdrop, and then of course I use movies a lot, and then it was The Peaceful Warrior, and then these things, and even the way I interact with Dale, or have different guys. Yeah, that language, or yeah, it's kind of interesting. And I got a funny story. I was in Mexico with David, and David for me is just a symbol of the spirit, and just this channel of. And one time he spoke to me like he was getting out of crazy, and I think he said like, "I love you, bro," or something, the way I would speak. And I was like, oh, he's just really like, he's just in the zone, and he just hears and delivers. And so I want to be that for these guys. I want to be that, speak the words that he will give me, to communicate and reach guys. And, even this other guy I sat with last time, it was the first time. And, as soon as he came in, there was a little bit of, he didn't know who I was and this. And so then we found the vein, and it was music, and it was like, and then he just lit up, and I was sharing about literally stuff from the 80s and 90s that I remember spiritual messages in. And I was like, man, have you ever listened to the Stain song? He's talking about awake. And he's like, yeah. And, and then all it's used to to fulfill that special function that you spoke of. So yeah, I want to remember that so that I can be used in that way as well, and not push it away and think it's not spiritual or something like that when it happens.
Yeah, that's also very important because the character that we for some reason have made, right, or whatever, to get home, it's being used, right? So
Mm.
so it's not the contrary of spirit like some people think, right?
Mm.
It's being used. Yeah. Would you like to share a little bit about what exactly changed in your mind when you had that revelation? Because I know you said your life was um, pretty intense before, and then it lightened up. But what was that change?
Yeah, sure. As I shared, I didn't have much spirituality in my life, and so I remember I was 11 years old. I was on the stairs of my house when I asked my father what happened when we died. And my father, being a pretty much devout atheist, said, we rot in the ground. And as an 11-year-old, that was a terrifying thought, that an endless abyss of nothingness. Like, so I was very afraid of that. And I was afraid of actually the idea in school when they talked about endless space. I was like, well, what do you mean it goes on forever? How is that possible? Like, the things I couldn't wrap my head around, but it brought up a deep fear in me. And so it actually wasn't until high school, when I was in geometry class, and someone, my professor, or he was saying, he was explaining infinity, but then he, instead of space going to infinity, he said, well, if you walk halfway to that wall and then you continue to walk halfway, you'll never get there. That's another realm of infinity. And I was like, oh, and that was almost like the first time there was something like, wait, we go inward as much as we go outward forever. So there was like this continuum thing. And so it relieved, for some reason in my mind, that fear of infinity. But a fear of God was overcome in that moment. I didn't know God existed. I had thought I had abandoned him, and all the belief in separation was true for me. I was the living prodigal son. I have a brother who's 3 years older than me, that was a straight A student, had never touched alcohol or drugs in his life, married with the family and the kids and all this. And so I had this, this failure thing, and not as good as my brother, going to a high degree. So I was that prodigal son story from the Bible as well. So when I had this experience, it was the release of all the guilt that we had talked about, and it came in phases. Actually, I was sitting in the room with my parents when the first upheaval. It wasn't what I call revelation. It was more of a spiritual awakening. And this was like, whatever. There's a lot of words for it, as far as all the chakras opening and, the uncoiling, but the energy of God flowed through me, and I was in tears in the room. And it was the first time I had purpose in my life. They had just got done reading the 12th step when it happened to me. And I turned to my mother and I said, Mom, God's real. And she said, I know. And I said, no, you, you would never worry again if you do this. And for the next 6 hours, I walked around the property in my Eckhart Tolle experience, where I just saw, everything as it was, no past and no future, seeing things as they were. They sparkled. It was snowing out. It was completely dreamlike, but I still didn't. This was just my introduction to my relationship with the spirit inside. The kingdom of heaven is within me. But the depths of that experience went on later that evening when I watched a movie. I actually watched August Rush, and that movie's about following the inner guide through music, and very beautiful movie. And it made my heart, swell. And I went back to my room and I surrendered to a deep. Now I'm at this point, I'm vibrating like, woo, and it's like, I didn't know really what was going on. I just knew that something was happening that was not me. And when I sat on the bed just before what I call, the revelation, which was God, the direct contact with me, I said things. I said, if you'll have me give up my life, so be it. Whatever you'll have me do, so be it. And I said 3 or 4 things. And when I said the final one, it was as if my heart opened up and like something emanated from my chest. That was the way it seemed. But it just, the world disappeared. And it was the great late ways. There's no way to explain it. And, the Lucy movie, Alpha Omega, you see everything that's ever happened, all of it, all happened, and, and it lasted forever. And I knew all this already happened. And I knew, all the stuff that the Course talks about, I knew in the holy instant. And it was like, and when I seemed to come back from that experience to my room and sitting on my bed, now I'm just like, woo, now I'm like times 100, this presence. And there was actually a light shining from behind my head that was emanating the room. And I was like, and it was in my consciousness, not in the room, but I certainly turned around to see where it was coming from. And, sat there, and it was just like, I repeated that whole night, 2 words. I said, no doubt, over and over and over and over again, because I didn't want to forget. I knew that my mind, that ego, would be coming back sometime. And I just kept saying, no doubt. I didn't want to forget. I didn't want to forget. And in that experience, I was shown my innocence and all these things. So what it showed me ultimately is that the world wasn't real. I had a practical experience that pierced the veil. And so how could I ever go back to buying expensive watches or like, wait, this actually means nothing. I had some cool things happen around that time where my watch actually fell off, and I saw it as a symbol of time falling away, a day before my experience. And it was like one of my most prized possessions at the time. And, so all that stuff just showed me that there's something else going on. I felt the presence of God, and then I saw that this is actually not what I thought. And so, I was a metaphysical Nazi at the beginning. I went straight to the woman that run the place, and I'm like, hey, it's all already happened. It's over. I'm trying to explain to her. So of course they're like, okay, we need to give this guy some drugs. But I didn't. I knew that something else. It happened exactly the way the 12 steps are written. I realized I was powerless. I realized I was insane, and that something else could restore me to sanity. And I made a surrender, and that's what happened. And I was like, so I did what they told me for a couple of months, but then, I didn't follow those protocols. And the same thing, I couldn't go back to work. Even the first sponsor I had in recovery was like, I think you should go back to work. You have a great business there. And I said, I'll do anything you tell me, except that. And, because I there was certain things I knew to my core. And so things that I wouldn't do that he told me, was like, all right, I think you should live with your parents for 6 months, because my floors were getting sanded while I was in recovery. And I was like, okay, I didn't want to do that. That was a spirit speaking through him. And I repaired those relationships in the next 6 months, because I lived with my parents and they saw the devotion and the truth for once, the honesty. I had been lying for 22 years about absolutely everything. And so I needed to do those things. But as far as going back to the world and worldly things, I had seen too much. It happened at a point in my life that it needed to happen. Some people, they say, oh, why did it doesn't happen to me? I needed it. I would I probably, if it wasn't that powerful, I probably would have went back. I actually did try to go back and play hockey, and because I really thought I loved hockey. So for the next year that I was in Connecticut, I tried skating and playing, but there was something missing. Of course, there wasn't. It was an egoic pursuit for me to excel. And was there some true desire in skating that I loved it? Sure, I'm sure there was something there for me, but I couldn't play. I played well. People were like, man, you're all over the ice. You're seeing everything. But I didn't enjoy it the way I did before. It wasn't what I was after. But even that, I was stubborn, and my body spoke to me first. I had broken my neck as a result of a drunken incident when I was 26. And when I was 39 is when it showed up, where my body started going numb. So I had to get neck surgery. And I had to quit playing hockey because I was stubborn, and I wasn't yet following my calling. I stayed on the East Coast for a year, and I still think it was, exactly what I needed, but there was something deeper calling me out of this world. And so that's the way it kind of worked. And that's why I saw things differently after that experience. So thanks again for that question.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. So, what would you, how would you suggest that one finds out how to follow one's calling? Because it's a big thing to say one has a calling, and it often is used, I think, by the ego to tell you this is what you're supposed to do, and to recognize that it actually is your calling and not just ego trying to get you on a idea that you are spiritual.
Sure. And I can tell you the way it worked for me, whether or not that would work for other people, because I understand your question and the idea that the ego may get in there, but the spirit, the course tells me the spirit can use what the ego made. So even my dislikes or my likes and my attractions. So the first thing I did was after I quit my job there, and I was still in Connecticut for a year, I volunteered to. I loved lacrosse. I played lacrosse as well as hockey, but I coached. I coached high school lacrosse, and I used that to hear the spirit. I used. Okay, I love lacrosse. The high school just started a team that year in my hometown, where I went to a private school and had been playing for 20 years. They just started a team, so it was like, wait, it's 3 minutes from my house, and so the symbols lined up. But then when I went there, I had to still watch my mind. And when I walked in, and the coach was like, "Oh, we're so happy that you're here to help us. You can do whatever you want. What do you want to do?" What does Jeffrey wants to go play with the leading attackmen, the best guys, and show them how to shoot around the back. But what I heard was, where are the guys that don't know how to throw? And I was like, okay. I was like, where are the guys that don't know how to throw? And I worked with all the guys that didn't even know how to throw a ball, the freshmen, and I went over and I worked with them. And by me following that, it strengthened that team to a degree that me going to follow that egoic. So I used, hearing this internal guide with, what was provided, or if I had no need for a job, and all those thoughts that people tell you, what would you do? And so that was how it started for me. But then I had to go, my journey went much, much deeper. I had to go beyond personal inspiration. I would have never told you that what I wanted to do in my life was go visit. I don't go, and people are like, "Oh, you going on vacation again?" I'm like, I just tell them, yeah, now. Like, yeah, I'm going to Ohio, or I'm done telling them that I don't vacation. I literally, the place I want to go is to high security prisons and speak with guys. Like, it's not what I ever would have imagined. But I had to go through a lot of unwinding for me to see what inspiration actually was, because I didn't know. Inspiration's actually not personal either. It can start that way, the way it did for me with, going to, coach lacrosse and those things. But then there was something deeper calling me, where I wanted to, go deeper into the mind. So it brought me to a conference in, Manhattan, where I met David and the Living Miracles community. And then I went there. And so whatever this phase of my life to follow this, which feels, someone just shared with me the other day, and my response was, they're like, this is your calling. And, it's like, it does feel, I said, well, for now. And I'm like, wait, this does, when I have these moments of activation or inspiration, just by, even my wife, when she was here last time, she lives in Mexico with the ministry down there. And she came to visit, and, for the week that she was here, we did some things that we had to take care of. And then she went out to do something on one of the final days. And she came back. And when she came in the house, she just looked at me and she's like, wow, the love in your eyes. What are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm just writing letters to guys upstairs that I had been putting off because my wife is here and I should spend time. All those, whatever. I was still working first, but it was like, those things are my pointers to, the spirit would have me, have me do. And so, yeah, and you say special function, and it feels that way. Even I was fortunate enough to get to speak with Judy Scott. She had me on Miracle Voices, and she just made her transition yesterday. And I was fortunate enough to get to speak with her before that, and how grateful am I for that. And she just started talking to me, and we had such a great conversation about her experience with prison ministry and all this stuff. And it was like, oh wow, like I never could have imagined it, but I had to follow those little steps to be shown what the next step is. So yeah, I have to follow. The Spirit led me through attraction. I was attracted to go live in community. I was attracted to that and all the different things to get to the seeming point that I'm at now. But yeah, I guess that would be the answer to how I found, and the Course tells me that, yeah, in this world, like you had started to talk about, Wanako, with the character of Jeffrey, there's a special, my function in heaven is creation. My function in this world is actually forgiveness, but my special function may look different. It might be a singer, it might be a podcaster, it might be a, talker. And this is what seems to be, bringing that feeling of joy to me, today. And so I'm trusting that. And yeah, so that's how it worked for me.
Well, thank you for sharing. Now it's getting time to wrap up. So is there anything that I didn't ask that you'd like to answer anyways?
No, nothing comes to mind, Wanaka. You asked some very good questions. I appreciate you.
Wonderful. Then you can once again state how one can contact you if one wants to.
Sure. You can actually go to my website, which is last-step.org, and there is a contact button there where you could send me an email. So that would probably be the best way to reach out to me. I'm also on Facebook if you are a Facebooker. I don't spend a whole lot of time there, but sometimes I post my posts there. I copy them and post them there so people can see them.
Wonderful. Yeah. And please spread the word about the podcast so that many people can find it, leave reviews, and yeah, so that everyone can profit who wants to profit from it. This is episode 68 already, so there's a lot of material that one can listen to. And I actually had David on the podcast as well, in case you didn't know.
I did. I had heard it wasn't long ago, I believe.
No, it's not that long ago. It's relatively recent. Yeah. And a few others that I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Then does any one of our listeners want to say something? Final comment or question?
No, just thank you very much. It was a really wonderful experience listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay. And thank you, Jeffrey, for taking the time and sharing about your work and your experience with following Spirit. And may we all be joined in this loving fulfillment of our special functions.
Thank you, Wanako.
Blessings to you, and till next time.